and live your life today. It doesn't matter what they say.
All right, welcome to another episode of Red Lotus Life, and this one is a special one. I'm super excited about this. This has been a long time coming. As always, I have my co-creator here, Sara Elizabeth Hoffman. And then today we have a special guest, Teresa DeMille, and she is she's such a beautiful, beautiful soul. I cannot wait. All right, so if you're new to Red Lotus Life, we do a couple of things, and we're both advanced spiral practitioners. I'm an advanced spiral practitioner. Sara Elizabeth is a spiral practitioner and also a womb spiral practitioner. We specialize in all kinds of things, but abuse, domestic violence, human trafficking, and non-violent communication. I mean, just all kinds of things, nervous system regulation, all kinds of things. And one of the things that we do that we're super proud of, because it's like uncharted territory in the spiral world, is say yes to soul. And so that is actually what we're going to be speaking about today with Teresa DeMille. She is such a beautiful person in so many ways. And we've been working together since I just barely pulled out the date, all of your paperwork and everything right here, since June of 2021. And I can't get over it, because the person that you are now is so different than the person I met back in June of 2021. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We are here to honor Teresa and her journey in this work and this deep work, and how it has just transformed. It has literally transformed your life. So I can't wait to go over that. So Teresa, welcome, welcome. You are a nurse practitioner. You specialize in electrophysiology. Did I say that all good?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Great. Okay. And we first met, like I said, back in June of 2021. You went through the spiral. You have been doing emotional clearing through this very religious, continuing this work every single month and say yes to soul, but also even going deeper than that, even with additional sessions and all kinds of stuff. And I can't even explain the breakthroughs that I've witnessed you go through. And so just excited. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself before we get into this?
Oh, that's where to begin? I guess when I met Lori, I was before I went to nurse practitioner school. I was a nurse. I have 5 kids, and since then I've just kind of gone on this journey with myself and learned how to kind of prioritize myself and do things that are important to me. Because I think before all of this, before going through the spiral, I really put myself last. I was on the back burner in my life, every aspect of it. So it really is part of what kind of empowered me to go back to school. And, I have a new career, and, my life is completely different in almost every aspect than it was 3 years ago.
I know. It's so fun. I love doing this, kind of the revisiting with different people, because the unique part about Say Yes to Soul is that it was created in January of 2020. Sara Elizabeth has been part of it since the very beginning. I mean, I was bouncing ideas off of her clear back before it even started. So she was there from the very beginning. So she's been doing this work too. And it's just crazy to see the growth that's happened. So can I visit your intention for spiral?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So with the spiral, it is emotional clearing. And what that is we're deconditioning and releasing trauma and emotions from the body, and all kinds of different spaces. I don't know. How would you explain it, Sara? We've actually talked about this a couple of times.
The way I explain it is that we're actually releasing from the DNA on a cellular level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's ancestral and it's generational work. And when Teresa and I met, you're going to die. You're going to die when we revisit this, because really your intention, your final intention was only 4 words, but I wanted to go over a little bit. I have 2 pages of notes here. So I'll just kind of run through them, I guess. And maybe you can just share like the space that you were at and where you are now, because it's so different. I mean, even just looking at you, you're so different. You have this glow, you have this like style about you. I mean, obviously you're super intelligent and your career has 100% expanded, but you as a person, I remember when I met you and we did a Zoom like this and I don't know where you were at your house. I just remember like the brick, and you had on like a hat and like you were kind of like crouched down because you also didn't have like no privacy. Just I don't even know. I don't know. I'll just go into this. All right. So one of the things that you said right off the bat was that you did not feel as if you were fulfilling your own potential in any way, shape, or form. You were just saying, like, I know there's so much more here, but I can't even tell you who I am. Like, there was no reference point to even begin to explain. You talked about wanting to feel secure in who you were. You used words like stagnated and suffocated and just struggle. Like, you used struggle quite a bit. You were talking about how you were struggling with developing relationships. And I don't know if you remember this, but you were saying like you didn't even know how to even talk to coworkers and things like that in the beginning. You just wanted to be comfortable and happy. And you were just saying, I just want to be fully me. No shielding, no hiding. But yet here you were. Like I said, I don't know exactly where you were, but it was almost as if you were hiding because you didn't have privacy. And you were trying to just, I don't know. It was interesting because now you're so bold and you're just like, here I am. Like you have confidence, you're secure in who you are. And so it's just so different. You were talking about your children and the type of mother that you wanted to be. And you were saying that you wanted to be present and available and to help them navigate their own selves and help them be secure and safe in who they are. But you were kind of saying like, I don't know who I am. So how am I supposed to do that?
Right.
When everything was so chaotic at that time, you're like, I'm just not present. I'm not available. My bandwidth is shot. I'm tired. I'm worn out. I'm worn down. I'm burned out. Things like that.
Yeah.
When it came to friendships, you were saying that you wanted to be the type of person that people would gravitate towards. And I 100% see that now.
Yeah.
I totally see it. When you were talking about family, you were talking about the relationship with your father, and you really wanted to heal that. Career, you wanted to be in a leadership role, and you really wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And now here you are as a nurse practitioner. In fact, I remember you going, I want to go to school, but I don't know how to make that happen.
Right.
It was, were you in the emergency room at that time or were you in ICU?
In the ICU, yeah.
That's what I thought. And here you are now, nurse practitioner in a clinical setting,
Right.
specializing in something major.
Yeah.
I'll have you talk more about that. Financially, you were saying, I just want to have a better relationship with money. I don't know if you had a relationship with money at all at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you wanted a relationship with money. You wanted to be able to make conscious decisions, but you also said, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
Like, what does that mean? I know I want it, but I don't know what it means.
Right.
Spirituality, you were sharing that you were LDS, that you were a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, but there were pieces missing and you just didn't, you actually wanted to learn more about spirituality, but I think at that time you were actually wanting to learn more even about that religion because you were saying, there's pieces missing and I don't quite know it all. So you were wanting that, nutrition, you were wanting to have a healthy relationship with food that wasn't like a coping mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And then physically, this was what you said. You said, I don't want to be critical of my body. I want to have a better relationship with her. And her is like underlined and capitalized. And now I'm like, so we were able to summarize it all up because that's kind of what happens with Spiral. We began with an intention, like intention and belief is everything. And the intention kind of sets the theme for the Spiral journey. And your intention was finding my authentic self.
Yeah.
So when I say that stuff, what comes up? Does that person feel so far, like, so,
Oh my
does it feel
gosh.
like a different lifetime?
Yeah, it does. It almost makes me sad. Like, it really makes me sad that I spent so many years of my life hiding from myself because I was so afraid that I was going to do something wrong or make someone uncomfortable, or someone wouldn't like me because of the things that I liked or wanted to do, or I spent my whole life accommodating everyone else, and it kind of put me into this paralysis almost, where I was afraid to interact with anyone or anything because I was afraid I was going to do it wrong. Because ultimately, I didn't have my own back. I wasn't supporting myself because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I want. I had spent so many years suppressing myself and doing things for everyone else, not even considering my own wants or needs or desires, that it got to a point where, like, I completely lost myself. I did not know who I was without, anyone else's opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got to this place where I just was completely hidden.
I totally remember that. I remember you saying, even like talking about work, right, and coworkers, and you were saying, I don't even know how to say hello. Like, how do I greet people? Because you said you would second guess that.
Yeah,
I wonder, did I say something wrong? And I'm like, just start with hello. Good
yeah,
morning.
right.
Thing. Um, I resonate with you. This is how I felt. And I know, Sara, like, do you remember pre-spiral?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Pre-spiral, I am 1000% a completely and totally different person. I can remember I would cry if I thought that I said something wrong, just break down and cry. Or if someone said something that was maybe like a projection, I just cried because I was always afraid that I was going to get in trouble. Um, it's just wow. I don't even recognize myself for sure. Self-love, what was that?
Right.
You know, um, just even being able to be here in this space and be able to create something that I've desired to create for so many years and was so dissociated that I could not create anything.
Mhm. Yeah, I know. It's really, it's an interesting place to be. And I feel like the people that probably resonate with all of these intentions, right? Everything that we just talked about, there's so many people out there that resonate with that and feel the same way, including myself. I was one of those people. So it's fascinating to witness you and where you are today. So let's get into that part.
Yeah.
Um, as well, I don't know. I'm just going to kind of revisit. Let's revisit each one. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll go into like how the work has continued with you and what's going on. Okay. So do you still feel as if you are not fulfilling your potential, or do you feel like you're on your way?
I feel like I'm on my way. Yeah. I mean, 100 times more than I was.
Mhm.
I obviously am still, exploring and discovering different parts of myself and fine-tuning things and understanding myself continuously. And I think that is where all of that comes in, like that's how you do that. That's how you begin to fulfill your potential. You first have to understand yourself and what your potential is.
Mhm. I feel like it's constantly changing too, especially
Right.
whenever we continue to do this work. It's constant soul growth. I don't
Right.
think there's a cap on if anyone were to say, "Yep, I'm totally at my potential," I'd be like, there's stuff going on."
Right.
Okay, how about insecurities? How do you feel about that now?
Oh, I mean, I still do have some insecurities, of course, but I just don't care as much anymore what people think about me. And that has probably been the most life-altering piece of all of this, is that I just am like, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do the things that feel good to me, and doesn't matter what anyone else's opinion is because it's my life.
Yeah. So can I share a little bit about that
Yeah.
on what I've seen? Okay, so when I met you, you were this, LDS is Mormon religion. So you were this Mormon woman, right? A member of this church, very clean, like meaning no tattoos.
Right.
And now, well, you had a couple, I think, maybe a couple, right? One or
Had
two?
one. Yeah, I had
Okay.
one.
I
I had
like it.
one when I was 21, and it was like a big no-no. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then I didn't get any more because, I felt bad about it because I broke the rules.
Mhm.
Even though my whole life I wanted tattoos. I wanted piercings. I wanted, to do all of these things, and I just didn't do it.
So how have you been able to express yourself being secure in who you are?
Oh, I mean, this is a whole thing because as, being a member of the church, um, pe people judge each other based on what they look like on the outside. So they will, in their own homes, be, breaking the rules that you can't see behind closed doors. But the people who walk into church with a nose piercing or a tattoo or a sleeveless dress or whatever it is, those are the people who get kind of ostracized, and people assume that they're, you know, bad. They get labeled as bad people because they outwardly are breaking the rules. So, my ex husband, that's another thing that came out of this, I guess. I got divorced after Spiral. Um, my ex husband still participates in the church, and my children do. So, that's probably one of the hardest transitions that I've made, especially because, I mean, obviously he doesn't understand any of this and has taken it very personally, and it's been a whole thing. So, me being able to continue and make these decisions and do things that I want to do, especially outwardly, is huge. Like, I never would have done that before, especially with someone like my husband,
Mhm.
and I got my nose pierced, I got tattoos, I did all this stuff before we even got divorced. So that was huge progress for me.
Mhm. Um, let's are we good to talk about that for just a second?
Yeah.
Let's talk about relationships because with I remember when I first went through Spiral. I mean, there's a lot that happens in Spiral, so people need to just we're happy to answer any questions here, but whenever we go through spiral and we start to shed the pieces of us that don't serve us, and we start to heal from that space, it is our expression that starts to come out. And a lot of times, and this is with, well, I'm going to say it's every time that I've worked with anyone in the spiral, it's always boundaries, right? Like boundaries. We don't really, people talk about boundaries all the time, but nobody actually says, well, what exactly does that mean? Like I can say I'm setting boundaries, but do I even know? And Sara Elizabeth and I have done a whole like workshop on this, and quite a few episodes on just boundaries, even because boundaries are really for us as people and not necessarily for others, but more for us so that we'll know what our boundaries are. And when I first started to share what my boundaries were in my intimate relationship, yeah, there's always some friction, right? There's always friction that ends up happening in resistance because people just aren't used to hearing that there's boundaries there. And I was somebody who was a martyr, big time. I was somebody that would totally just give, and then nothing was left when I came home. And then if I didn't feel appreciated, then that martyr would come out super strong. And so whenever I first started to kind of set those boundaries, the people in our lives, they don't know how to respond to that because they're not used to that. And so a lot of times, if they're not open to that, they do take offense. They take offense. They think it's them. I don't know. It's very interesting what happens with our relationships whenever we start to actually hold the boundaries. That's the other thing. Like I would have to hold my own boundaries with myself.
Right.
But what happens is once we like you get over that initial hump, then you start to actually have really beautiful relationships that end up getting cultivated because of that, because there are boundaries. And also, like because I've been able to set my own boundaries, and my husband's been able to as well, and we're able to work with that. But how has that affected your relationships now that you've been able to set and establish boundaries right off the beginning, like in the beginning?
Gosh, I mean, so my experience this whole time has been, either people were able to accept those boundaries, and the changes that I was making, or they weren't, and that's just part of the process. And the people who aren't ready or willing to accept and accommodate and, go with you on the journey, those relationships become really strained. And I experienced that with obviously my ex-husband, with my sister, with, like friends. There are a bunch of people who I just don't interact with anymore because of all of this. And then, I've developed a whole slew of new relationships that are just the most beautiful relationships I've ever experienced in my life. I have a group of friends who are so supportive, and we just love each other deeply and support each other, and it's so great. It's just what I wanted, I have people in my life who really like see me and know me and understand me and accept that and accept all of it. They accept the pieces that maybe they don't like or they don't want to. Like, we just accept all the pieces of each other, and it's all okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What has been when you're able to express yourself in these relationships, what has that done for you?
I think that gives permission to everyone else to also express their boundaries. I think that's the biggest, like, that's the key. Like, if you're standing up and being like, hey, here's my boundary, or, you know, hey, I know we made plans, but I just really don't feel like doing that tonight. Or whatever it is, you know. And you make it about you because it is about you. And it gives everyone else permission to be like, oh, well, okay. It's okay for me to say how I feel too. You know,
Mhm.
so then you can have this mutually supportive relationship. And I think the fear or the reason why we don't have relationships like that all the time is because we're afraid that exerting our boundaries, people are going to make that about them, you know, like they're going to get offended because I said, whatever, I don't want to do XYZ, you know. But I think it's a matter of framing it, first of all, and then having other people who are receptive to that, you know, because not everyone's going to be receptive to you being like, hey, I really like you. And I know we said we were going to go get dinner tonight, but I'm just really tired and I had a long day and I don't want to go anymore. I hope
Mhm.
that's okay, you know, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I just think it's really beautiful
Mhm.
to have people in your life who are receptive to that.
Mhm.
I don't know if that answered the question, but
It totally does, because what that does is I mean, honestly, I think what happens is, like, for me, whenever I'm able to say that and I'm not questioned about it and people don't take offense about it, there's just it's just a deeper, more authentic relationship.
right.
Because I can't tell you how many people, I mean, I was this person that I would tell like a white lie or something like that just so that I wouldn't offend
Yeah.
somebody. And it was never, and this was 100% because of the conditioning of what I went through and what I've
Mhm.
experienced in my relationships, you know? So
Yeah.
it's really amazing when you can just be who you are and you can just say, hey, this is it, and you're accepted for that.
Right. Create safety within that relationship so then you can be fully authentic,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
have to be afraid to share those parts of you because even if, you know, someone gets upset about whatever thing, you know, you have a safe enough relationship that you can come back to it later and have a discussion about it if that's what you need, you know?
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, because then, I mean, it's when we're vulnerable, right? We're vulnerable with each other that's actually when the soul grows. And
Yeah.
then that's as a community, it just ripples out.
Yeah.
How has that been with your kids?
Oh, my kids. Um, it's so interesting because they see, you know, they have two different homes now, which they were obviously very apprehensive about when this first started. They were scared. I think we all were a little anxious about it, understandably. Um, but it's been interesting to see how they respond to each of us differently and how they act in our homes. And, you know, like I have one daughter, she's 10, and she just doesn't want to be at her dad's house ever. And that's not to say that I'm so great and amazing and wonderful, but she just doesn't feel comfortable at his house,
Mhm.
you know, for a variety of reasons. But, you know, I just consciously try to have a relationship with each of my kids individually and make them feel safe and heard and understood,
Mhm.
you know, by creating boundaries.
Mhm.
So,
Well, and so same thing, I had my first marriage. I feel like everybody knows about my first marriage by now. So the same type of thing would happen, right? And it was one of those things where it was really, it was cool for, um, I'm trying to say, like, how do I say this in the right way? It was really nice to have my kids be able to express themselves and to be able to set their own boundaries, and then for us to be able to honor those boundaries.
Yeah.
And it was even better and more amazing whenever I would see it ripple out. Like right now, that's kind of what we're going to get to with the Say Yes to Soul stuff. We've been doing this work long enough now to where the work is rippling out into the generational piece of this. And now that other side of the family, on the paternal side of the family, are also honoring those boundaries. And it's just amazing because whenever we take these emotional pieces out and we can just fully be who we are, I feel like we're there for I feel like we're just better parents. We're more authentic and we're able to create that safe space for our children to be able to express themselves in ways that they may not have before. And for me, I mean, that was a pattern for me and on my paternal side, actually, because of the Japanese culture. So there was a pattern of not being able to express ourselves and to not be able to be who we are because we had to fit into this very structured box. And so it's been, I mean, I just love every time I talk to you and you're talking about your children and they are just, I feel like they're in full expression of themselves all the time.
Yeah.
And they each have their own unique gifts. And it's been so beautiful to even see that as they grow.
Yeah. And I think too, I feel more empowered to, I don't know, help them understand who they are and allow them to question things that I never would have allowed before. I would have just brushed it away and been like, that's not what we think about and we don't talk about that. Like, and now we can have open conversations and, I think it helps them to really cultivate their own critical thinking, which is so important in our world now. We're exposed to so many things that I don't have any control over. So I think it's really important for me as a parent to teach my kids, like, hey, you don't have to like take everything at face value. Just because someone tells you something, including me, doesn't mean that that's true or that you have to believe that. Like you get to decide.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge,
Yeah,
huge, huge.
that is
I love
so
this.
huge. It's so huge because what that does is it gets them to just open up more, right? Open up more and explore. There's so much in this world out there to explore. And I feel like, well, that's one of the things that we start to learn as we do this work is how much we actually shut down our children.
Yeah.
Almost, I mean, pretty much right away, right? Wow, that is so cool. So what, when we're talking about family, like let's go into the family part real quick, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
You can share whatever it is that you'd like to share about your, that relationship, because that was one of the things that you really wanted to do. You really wanted to be able to heal that piece with that relationship with your father. So do you mind sharing a little more about that?
Sure. So my parents got divorced when I was 11, and my dad basically, and it's so interesting how you have such a different perspective when you're adult than you did when you were a kid, living through all of this. But my dad basically abandoned us. I wouldn't probably even know who he is if my mom hadn't basically forced us to maintain a relationship with him. So we eventually moved to Arizona. He was living in Idaho. So it's like a 16-hour drive. My mom would drive us every summer to and from, pay for the whole trip, like he didn't help at all. And just would make us go visit him for like a week in the summers. And that's the only time during the year that I saw or heard from him. He wouldn't call us on holidays, wouldn't call me on my birthday, never sent me a Christmas gift or a birthday, nothing. He just was not involved, which at the time just was normal. because that was my life, right? And then I make it to adulthood and I was like, wait a second.
Mhm.
What? Especially after I had my own children, I think that's really when I was really angry about it because, I know how I feel about my own kids, and I cannot imagine not wanting to have a relationship with them. So then that turned in to what's wrong with me. My own father doesn't even want a relationship with me. He doesn't want to know anything about me. He doesn't care to interact with me, of his own accord. He's not putting any effort into having a relationship with me. So then that became about me.
Mhm.
So that was a huge, wound that I had to heal. And I know I'm not the only one who's, gone through something like that. But eventually got to a point that I was so angry with him because I tried to talk to him about it, tried to communicate, and he just kind of brushes it off, shuts it down, ignores the problem. So I finally just stopped talking to him. One day I just was like, I am not going to have a relationship with you if you're not going to put any effort into having a relationship with me. Like, it's not worth my energy. I'm not putting my energy into this place. So I didn't speak to him for probably 5 years. Didn't talk to him, didn't see him, didn't interact with him at all. I would hear, some things from my siblings every now and then, but I personally didn't have a relationship with him. Until I got to a point where one time I was visiting my little brother who lives in Idaho near my dad in the same city. And we had stopped by there for some reason, I can't remember. And I just broke down crying and went into the house and gave my dad a hug because I missed him.
Mhm.
So I think it was that point that I, realized this is not something that I can just brush under the rug. I need to deal with this. This is something I need to resolve.
Mhm.
So I think that's where that came from. And that's where that motivation was, because it was affecting my life in ways that I didn't even realize or understand. And now I have, having done all of this work, gone through all of these things, realized, that all of this is about him, not about me, doing all the things. I have completely let go of that relationship where, I have no expectations from him anymore, which is where all these feelings were coming from, right? I have expectations that you're my dad, you should be acting this way. You should be doing these things that he wasn't doing. He wasn't fulfilling my expectations, so I was sad and disappointed. So now I just have no expectations for him. And that allows me to be able to have a relationship with him where, when I'm with him, we're great. We can have conversations. I could spend time with him. I can love him. And I don't have that anger, and that wound that I'm harboring because he's just a human.
Mhm.
He's just a human with a bunch of his own issues that I don't need to take on myself anymore.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I feel like with this work, I feel like that's actually what happens quite a bit, right? Is that we're so conditioned to, by society, that this is what that relationship is supposed to look like. This is what
Right.
a father-daughter relationship
Right.
is supposed to look like. And if it doesn't look like that, then we do think something's wrong with us.
Right.
But whenever we're able to let go of these expectations of what that's supposed to look like and how people are supposed to show up for us, it just relieves so much pressure to you just see it for what it is.
Right.
And if it's in alignment with who you are, then you keep it and you cultivate it in that way. And you have like kind of like what you said, you're like, okay, we just have these these conversations and things are great. But if it's not, and it's actually toxic and unhealthy or whatever, then the other piece of that is that you can let it go. But I love how you said like it is 5 years in between. And then when you went and saw him and you just broke down and cried, which absolutely, that means he means something to you. That
Right.
means you missed him. So it's just, I love what this work does for the relationships. Again, the relationships in our lives, because there's all these different wounds with our parents that
Right.
get swept under the rug.
Right.
And we're told to just cut them off.
Yeah.
And that's, I just don't, I feel like there is a space to heal those. I mean, obviously in the right spaces, right? In the right relationships, or not even right, but if it's in alignment.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. I think it just allows you to choose how you interact with people. You know, it gives you the choice more, rather than, you know, coming from a place of reaction, you know.
Mm-hmm. We're letting go of the reaction. It's all about the response.
Right. Yeah,
And
and then,
again, when you have this emotional attachment and this emotional wound, then we're not operating from an authentic place. We're operating from a wounded place.
yeah.
Well, that is beautiful. How has going through this work, it feels like it's been more enriched relationship.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like, so I came from a place where I didn't have a whole lot of relationships, but the relationships that I did have were very superficial. You know, like I didn't feel like anyone knew who I was. I didn't know anyone else. I didn't really have anyone I could, you know, call on outside of my family, right? I didn't have people that I could just call up in a pinch and be like, hey, I need help, or, you know, I didn't have anyone to cry to, or, you know what I mean, outside of my own family relationships.
Mhm.
So now I have, like I said, a whole group of friends, and we talk to each other every day, and they're my people, and we go on vacations together. And, you know, if we could go, you know, live on a compound in the middle of nowhere, we probably would.
I love that.
I know. Like that's actually Sarah and I met whenever I was first starting to do this work. And that's how I feel like she's one of my best friends. Like she is a
Mhm.
sister till the end.
Yes,
And
love
I
that.
just, yeah, and having like these authentic relationships,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I mean, there's always authenticity in relationships, but I think until I knew myself, like I couldn't even be that person. I couldn't have the depth, kind of what you were talking about. It's like that
Mhm.
enrichment, it's that depth and being able to have real vulnerability
Right.
with people and feel safe to be there and say, like, these are my people.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's all about that safety within those relationships. And it's just something I've never experienced before, you know, even in my family relationships, which is why, you know, I have one sister who I was really, really close to, all through, you know, she's less than a year older than I am. We had the same group of friends. We went, you know, all through school together. And we were just very, very close and codependent. And having gone through all of this, you know, it's been an adjustment in our relationship, but I'm actually, I don't want to say surprised, but happy that we've been able to kind of work through it together. Um, and we've learned how to navigate our relationship. And, you know, she's been willing to grow and change with me and accept me as I've, you know, kind of figured out who I am,
Mhm.
which has been great.
What has been hard for that? Let me ask you that because I think probably anybody who's listening to this probably just keeps hearing, well, wait a second, she got divorced.
Yeah.
Like these things have been happening. I don't know, like I don't know what this is all about.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about like how, because it's very true. It's when people know you for who you were, which was this, and I say you meaning the collective, right? Like I'm including. So when people knew me before, there was like this mask, a little bit, this mask, just because I didn't really quite know who I was. Yeah, I was authentic. Yes, I had depth to me. Yes, I was honest and all the things and had integrity and all of the. That's not what I'm saying here. It's this deeper layer of even being able to know what you truly want so that you can actually and know who you truly are so you can actually express it out into the world. And sometimes people just go, I don't know who this person is because
Right.
it's so different. It's
Yeah.
just so different. I remember whenever I first started, like before I didn't really curse or swear. And all of a sudden I was like a sailor. Like I was sort of like a sailor. I would say it's so easy. My husband would look at me and just go, like he always thought it was so unattractive, So I really didn't want to do that. But then once I was able to just freely express myself and then kind of get it out there, it was almost like a kid in a candy store, kind of.
Yeah.
Like when
Yeah.
I first felt that freedom and that safety of like, I don't care what people think about me.
Right.
I'm going to just say and do whatever it was, but it was always in a positive intention and a positive light. But because people like that, if I started to swear like a sailor, my mom was looking at me all funny because they just weren't used to me speaking like that. And I
Right.
don't really even do that now that it's kind of settled in and I just know that I can if I want. Now it's more, but in the beginning, some people don't know how to receive us.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the people who've been in your life forever, because they're used to you responding a certain way or reacting a certain way. If they say something to you, they expect you to respond a certain way, right? So I think, as I kind of mentioned this earlier, but, like this is what happened to me was, I have people who stuck around and stuck with me through all of this, like my sister, even though it's been so hard and our relationship has really had to grow and change, which is always uncomfortable. And there's people like my ex-husband who just wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready. He wasn't willing to, I don't even know that I can identify all of the things that it was and why it all happened the way that it did, but he wasn't ready for it. And some of that's probably about me and some of it's about him, right? Because he wasn't ready to accept it and he wasn't willing to go with me on the journey because he was so used to me behaving a certain way. And also he very much has a manual that he lives his life by. He's got a rule book, and if you don't fit into that manual, then that's a problem for him, So when he has established expectations anyway, he's just not very good at being flexible.
Let me ask you this. How much of that do you think the religion has to do with it?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
I think being raised in a very, a high demand religion has that effect on everyone. And then on top of that, he also is very rigid and controlling and wants things to be the way he wants them to be. So he has both of those things, kind of playing against our relationship because when we got married, I was very much like the submissive wife, and walking on eggshells. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to do anything that would make him upset. I didn't want to, disrupt anything. I would never exert my opinion or do anything that I thought he would be upset about. unless he didn't know about it. So, so yeah, to see that, drastic change where all of a sudden I'm like, wait, no, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to, get a tattoo, and I'm not going to ask your permission, and I'm not going to tell you about it. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Like, that was a big change. And he did not like that. So,
Well, I think when people put us inside a box, it's hard for them too. And
yeah,
so it's it is interesting how sometimes it does, there's relationships that are dissolved in that way.
Mhm.
But it is always, from what I've seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, um, when people do dissolve these relationships and these marriages, they become better people because of that. Does that make sense?
yeah,
I'm trying to, like, I'm happy that I am not with my children's father anymore because he definitely could not handle me now. That is definitely it. Like, he wouldn't be able, and I don't want to say that I am this wild person or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, he was the same way. He was somebody that he just liked things a certain way. He
yeah,
liked things a certain way. He liked his home to be a certain way. And there was really no room for me to be myself. And so whenever I did start to find my voice and I did start to be who I wanted to be, I mean, even now, like, I think he appreciates it now. I mean, I haven't talked to him in a minute, but from what the kids say, I think he appreciates that now because now he's seeing the person that he actually knew before whenever he sees me. And he sees me out there shining and expressing and doing all the things. And I don't think a lot of times, we start to fall into roles, these roles, and I mean, everything always happens slowly over time, right? And we start to
Mhm.
lose ourselves as we're in relationships. And this is usually both people, whenever you're in these relationships, you start to lose ourselves. And I think that's something that's really important to say around relationships it's important to continue to be your individual self. But especially whenever you're so young, and I was young, getting
Mhm.
into a marriage. When you're young, you kind of don't know who you are. But also, you grow and you expand. And so, if you can be in relationships that grow and expand, like, the other partner should be allowed to also grow and expand, right?
right.
And then you grow and expand together. And then it's just this really beautiful relationship. And
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't. We're in relationships that are just for a season.
Mhm.
And that's okay too.
Yeah, it's totally okay. So I wanted to ask you really quickly about, because you did want to go to school. I remember that. You wanted to go back to school, but you just didn't exactly know how. You knew you wanted to do the next steps, but you didn't know
Right.
anything. So how has your career changed?
So, I was a nurse for a long time. I was a nurse for 11 years. And most nurses, by the time they get to 11 years, they don't decide to go back to school. It's one of those things that either you're going back to school within the first couple of years of getting out of nursing school because that was your plan, or you're a nurse forever. Like, there's this really small percentage of nurses who are nurses for a long time and then suddenly are like, oh, I guess I'll go back to school. So it's kind of unusual. But I kind of had fallen into, there was a point in our marriage when I had been in nursing school or not in nursing school, I'd been a nurse for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I'd gotten to a point where I was like, I gotta make some more money. Like, we have so many kids, and like, this is not gonna work. And my ex-husband was like, oh, well, no, you can't do that. Like, don't do that. Like, I'll just get a job. I'll do blah, blah, blah. Like, I'll figure it out. And then he just didn't have a job for like 10 years of our marriage.
Wow.
So it just never happened. Um, but it was something that like I wanted to do, not just for the money, but just because that's kind of the kind of person I am. Kind of always looking for the next thing, and I have to have something to keep me occupied and stimulated, and I have to have things to keep me interested, or I just shut down, because that's just who I am. I get disinterested, and then I get sad, and I have to go do something else. So anyway, I wanted to go to school for a long time and just kind of had been shut down about it. So then when I got to this place where I was feeling more empowered for myself, I finally felt like I could make that decision, because I've done all kinds of hard things. It was so hard to be in school and, working full time, and had 5 little kids. My ex-husband was in PA school at the same time. Of course, he wasn't working, so that means I was working and taking care of the house and doing all the things. He was traveling a lot for school, wasn't there a lot. And, it was hard. It was really hard. But that wasn't the only period of my life that I had to do things like that. And we just did it, and it worked out.
I know. I love it because when you finally made that decision, you were like, yeah, I'm going to do it, and it's just going to work out. And the whole time I was about, I don't know how she's doing this. How is she doing this? But now what has happened, because everything is temporary. That's what I love about you and the way that you think. Everything is temporary, and you had that squeeze for that amount of time, but now you are going into this whole different level. It's kind of new, actually, like in the last few months. So
yeah. So I just started my nurse practitioner job in February of this year. So it's only been like 3 months. So, and I'm still in this period of my life where I am mentally exhausted all the time. Like sure, I got the degree, but I have so much to learn still. So I'm in this place where I just am in learning mode 24/7. I come home from work just exhausted and overwhelmed, and also sort of feeling like I didn't really do anything today, which is really hard for me. Because again, I have to I don't know, I just get a lot of fulfillment from my career and from my work. And I feel like, how do I say this without sounding egotistical?
just say it.
I feel like I have a lot to contribute to the groups that I'm in. So I'm in a place right now where I'm the new kid and I don't know as much. So it makes me feel like I'm not contributing very much. So
I'm like, do you know how proud I am to hear you say this right now? And just be like, I have a lot to contribute. I have a lot to contribute to this group, because in the past, you've always held back. Like that's what was going on. You would always hold back. And so the fact that you are owning this and you're owning who you are, like you are a very intelligent person who has so much to offer anyone who crosses your path, especially within the career and in the medical health field. Like it's just,
I mean, it's not even necessarily medical knowledge, right? It's like the way things are run and the systems and the organization and this and that. And I just feel like I have things to offer, but I'm in this weird place because I'm new. So my opinion doesn't matter yet. So I just have to kind of get through this period again.
Yeah, I know. But then you're going to acclimate, and then you're going to own it, and then you're going to say, okay, I need to now expand my knowledge again.
Yep. I'll go do something else. That's the great thing about medicine, is I can always go to do, a different specialty when I get tired of this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always great. I mean, you're always needed.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about this part then, because so you have now been, you went through the spiral. Oh, before we go into that, how have you spiritually grown? Those missing pieces that you were looking for and searching
Yeah.
for.
I,
Talk to us about that.
I remember when I first started Spiral, um, just the things that we were talking about and the language that was used, it all felt very familiar. There was nothing that I was learning that I was like, that's crazy. I've never heard that before. I just felt like I was taught it in a different way, um, and in a different context, which to me made a huge difference. It made things feel more approachable and more familiar and more tangible. And I think that's the piece that was missing. I feel like I can't speak for any other organized religions, but at least within the LDS church, um, spirituality is so impersonal almost. They talk about it um, like you individually have access to, the spirit, to God, to personal revelation. They say these things, but then they also at the same time have all of these barriers in place to actually accessing that. It's very patriarchal religion. So there's always, a male leader you have to talk to, or, whatever ritual you have to go through, or, whatever it is. And putting it in that context, which I didn't realize until, looking at it from a different perspective, how isolating that really is and how much distance that puts between you and your own personal spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is, that's what the pieces that were missing. It just felt so impersonal and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that, I mean, I didn't grow up religious, but I did grow up very spiritual.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things that I hear over and over again is that, and there's nothing against religion. I think there's a place for it. I think some people definitely need it in their lives. And so not knocking religion at all, but it's one of those things where people say, they talk about this connection and these ways to get to heaven and, salvation, right? Just how to receive your salvation
Right.
but they never really talk about, like what you said, the personal part. They never really talk about, but how do you do that? How do you actually do that? And in so many religions, like they talk about prayer, but how many religions do you both know that it's the exact, like the prayer is basically a ritual and it's the same words, like the words don't ever change.
Right.
And so having that personal connection is totally taken out and like completely taken out.
Mm-hmm.
And that individuality, right, of how to express and connect with your spirituality in that way. So one of the things that I really enjoy about Spiral and Say Yes to Soul is that you begin to develop this very unique connection to whatever and whoever your higher power is. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no I mean, you can label it if you want to, but there's also so many layers to it too. And that's the part that I want to say was probably the most significant change in me is that and again, that's authentic connection to self too, right? Is whenever you start to understand yourself so well that you actually do know how to communicate with your higher power and
Right.
have that special relationship and that sacred relationship
Mm-hmm.
instead of it just being words set in a building at a certain time or something. And there's a place for that. Like I said, there is a place for that and there's reasons for it. and everything else. But whenever it comes to that personalized relationship, oh man, that's like when everything opens up.
Yeah, and I think it's about, at least for me, it was about empowering me to find my own way. You know, like taking out the barrier of you have to do XYZ, you know, allowed me to find my own way, my own form of spirituality. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so it just is, it's the same but different.
It is the same but different. And so I feel like this is what I've seen over and over and over again in everyone, including myself, who's gone through the spiral, is that once you have all of that junk out of the way, right? All of that initial junk out of the way, because your intention was finding your authentic self, right? So you get all that junk out of the way, you have this connection to self, you're able to express it in ways that you could, I mean, in style or language or however it is. And you get to now, like, money, oh, the money story is always a thing every
Yeah.
single time. But once you're able to connect with all that, the junk's out of the way, I feel like that's always like the next layer that's usually addressed with spiral, is now you have, because you don't realize how tightly conditioning and money are, self-love and money, self-worth and money. I mean, especially in the Western side of the world, we're very productive over here, and it's very much about assets, that like you're defined by your success, by your accomplishments and your material possessions and things like that. So something that has, like, Sara Elizabeth and I have definitely noticed as we continue to do this work, is our money story is blown out of the water.
Yeah.
Like totally dissolved, to the point where sometimes my husband, he's always like, but at some point you have to care about money. But I'll be honest, like, I don't care about money. For me, it's all about impact. That's what it's about. And if you think of, like, going back to actual authentic self-worth and self-love and all of that, it really is not tied to material possessions or financial success or any of those things. So what has been your experience as you've continued to do this work? Because also the thing with the money story is that it is ancestral. Very much. We have our wealth wounds that have been handed down to us.
For sure.
I'm always like, thank you for that. I'll give an example real quick to anyone who's listening. So for me, a good example of this is that my family is from the Hawaiian Islands. So prior to them becoming a state, my family actually owned a lot of Kauai, had the pineapple plantations and all of that. And we're pretty wealthy back then in that day, as for wealthy people, or for what that was. Back then, they didn't really have a lot of that because they weren't Americanized yet. So when they did become a state and they became Americanized and Mr. Dole went over and all of that, they actually lost a lot of the land. A lot of the, just with the way that everything kind of sifted out. So there was a huge wealth wound there. My family never recovered from that. That was my great grandfather. And so my family never recovered from that. And so I went deep into that because it was also Japanese. It was also, I remember, like, my grandparents were in arranged marriage. I mean, there was so much that went into that way of living. But whenever we became a state, when Hawaii became a state, all of that was wiped away. So there was pride, there was self-worth, there was all of this stuff was woven into it. But as I've been able to continue doing this work and say yes to soul, so much of that is just being unweaved in so many ways. Like, I have a pride, but it's not connected now to that type of thing. So Sara, let me ask you this, because you also have your own little story, and then I'd love for Teresa for you to talk about what's happened with you.
My own little story about what, the money story? My story has always been that there's no need for money. like I was very attached to the fact that I didn't believe that I mean, clearly we have to have money to survive, but um, for so long, just I could not wrap my head around the fact that I guess number one, it is so ingrained in society that those people who are the wealthiest have control, and so that's what I saw money as. Those people who had the most money were able to control me and dictate those things that I could or couldn't do, and that was really the root of my money story, I think.
So what's happened as you've done this work? How has that evolved?
Oh, I need money. I need money, and there's not it's not about, like you're saying, it's about the impact that can be created with the money that we receive. How can I be of service with this money that I receive? And just allowing now, just being willing to allow myself to receive.
Yeah, I've seen that. So Teresa, how have things changed with you? Because you left a message in the Say Yes to Soul chat was it last month?
Last
I
month,
remember.
months ago, whenever that was. So money for me has always been something that I had no control over, and we just never had enough. And this is totally generational. Like, my family are just not money people, and that is the belief that I have grown up with. And it's not like anyone ever told me that. It's not anything that we talked about. It just was the subtext of my life. And I think my mom's life and my dad's life and my grandma's life, it just is this total family money story. Like, we're not money people. There are people in this world who have money, and then there are people like us, and we don't have money. And that has been, like I said, I think it was just the feeling of complete and utter lack of control over that. Because I think that's really what makes the difference, is there are people out there who are like, I can have as much money as I want to have. Like, I will just go make some money, and that was never a thought that I had in my mind. It was always like, I'm not going to have money because we're not money people. And that thought has just been completely erased. Like, I've come to a point now where I'm like, I can have as much money as I want. I have a job. Great news. I have a job. I can buy whatever I want. I have a job. And if I need more money, I just work some extra shifts, or I find another job, or I feel completely in control of how much money I have and of my own money, which is not something I ever thought would happen for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't remember what the emotional block was back then. Do you remember, either one of you? Because it was so big. Each one of us actually had a really huge breakthrough, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. Was that the Dogma?
I think it was Dogma. That's what I was about to say.
Okay, so Dogma, rigid thinking, there's rules, this is who we are. We're not money people, because I thought the same thing, right? Like, that was us too. Whenever I say my family was financially devastated, they were. My uncle, he was amazing. It was all about education, right? Education. And so he went out, he got educated, he had a great job and all these things. And in my mind, he was successful.
It's so interesting because everyone in my family has been to college. I have family, they all have PhDs, and we're all just still poor. Like, no one has money. We're all struggling. I don't have relatives with like a big old house, nothing. So to me, it just is like, I think that was more reinforcement for me that like, it doesn't matter what you do, you have no control. You can go get as much education as you want. You can
Mhm.
go do whatever things you want. Like money is not for you.
Hmm. Yeah. And then the second that we released Dogma and we were able to release that and we were able to integrate that with the integration activities and actually start taking steps. Now, all of a sudden, we're creating this life that we love. We're starting to realize, oh my gosh, there is no ceiling. There's no
Mhm.
ceiling here. I have complete control over how I make money, where the money comes from, because that's another thing, right? Whenever we're like in dogma and we're rigid and we're in this box, there's no way for money to actually come. And it's all magnetic frequencies, vibrations, all kinds of stuff. But when we take away the limiting beliefs that kind of make up this person that we think we are, then oh my gosh, just so much happens. We literally begin to create a life that we love from this authentic place that we never thought was possible.
Mhm.
And that's in relationships, our intimate relationships. We begin to create, even if we're not in a relationship, we're open to that, right? We're open to the possibility of like, oh, I can have the relationship that I deserve and that I want. And it doesn't actually need to look like the romance movies or anything like that, that it can actually be all these other different ways of relating. Same with spirituality. I mean, spirituality is such that is a personal thing on every level. And so when we connect spiritually, it's just like beyond. I mean, it's hard to talk about it when someone doesn't have a reference point. I know that was me. I had
Yeah.
no reference point, so I had no idea what people were talking about. I actually thought spirituality and religion was the same thing.
Mm.
So not the same thing. And then when it comes to like parenting, I'm blown away. I wish I would have had this work presented to me when my kids were young. I would have
Mhm.
been a totally different parent than I was. But I'm grateful for what I have now because the relationship that I have with my children it's so authentic. They have full expression of who
Yeah.
they are and they feel safe to do so. Where I was not that parent. I was a very strict parent. So they didn't have that before. And so now to see them evolve in that way, and my friendships, very authentic in every way. In fact, I'm actually not interested in any other relationships that aren't.
Mm.
I just
Right.
don't even
Yeah.
waste my time with it or
Yeah.
conversations too. Any kind of conversations, I just have no interest in that, which has been amazing. Because then what that does is it just opens up this whole like creative space within us too. Like we're meant to be creative. We're meant, especially as women, we are meant to create life in whatever way that means.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to share before I start? I wanted to ask you one more thing.
I don't think so. I think we about touched on all the things.
Yeah. What about you, Sarah? Anything that you wanted to share?
No, have just been so in the energy of this clear.
The one for
Yeah.
this month?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just hanging in there with you.
Okay.
But
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I thank you so much, though, for being on this call with us and for just sharing your journey. It's been incredible.
So good. So we are in uncharted territory.
Mhm.
Um, I have a really good relationship with the mother of Dane Thomas. Her name's Patricia Newton, and she is his mom. And Dane Thomas is the creator of the spiral. And I think this Say Yes to Soul is probably the longest ongoing on a consistent basis, where group clearings are happening and group the work as a group are happening. And so we're really, really seeing this now ripple out into our children. And like I said, into the paternal side of like my children. And we're seeing it start to ripple out in levels that we've never seen before. And I've been talking to them about that a little bit because it's insane how we really can release conditioning that is ancestral. We can also keep what has been like the good stuff that's been passed down to us, but we can release and we can heal these wounds and live in a sovereign state, in a healed sovereign state, and create this life and be accepted for who we are in ways that we never experienced before. So have you, or like, talk to me about this intention of finding my authentic self. Do you feel as if you have found your authentic self, or is it still evolving? I mean, I feel like we're always evolving, but
Right.
share with us this little piece about finding my authentic self, because you literally had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. I think I know myself now, whereas before I didn't even know who I was, what was important to me, what I wanted, what my opinions were, and I feel so much more freedom in my own life and more in control. I feel like I am choosing intentionally how to live my life and doing the things that make me happy and make me satisfied. And I think I still have things to discover about myself, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it too. And that's the whole point of Say Yes to Soul, right? Is to keep digging and to keep going and to uncover all of these things that I feel like Spiral just scratched the surface on. And it's been like all of this since then that has kept unraveling all of these things and allowed me to come more fully into who I am.
Oh my gosh, it's been so incredible. It's been just incredible in every way to watch the transformation and to witness this. It's been beautiful to see it ripple out in your community, in your career, in your children, in all of your relationships, the friendships and the sisterhood that you now have. I mean, it's just been incredibly beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So if you like what we talk about, please hit the like button because it shows us that you want to learn more, because we can definitely go deeper into everything. If you think that there's someone in your life that you can share this with, definitely share it with them, because that's why we do this. That's why we get intimate and vulnerable and share all the deepest, darkest pieces of us, is to really help others and to help impact other people's lives. And then we do come on here quite a bit and share more episodes on workshops and more people like this and resources. And, it's incredible what Red Lotus Life has actually evolved into. So definitely subscribe. And then if you want to dive deeper, we invite you to go and check out Say Yes to Soul. It's just incredible with everything that we do there, all the resources and the emotional clearing sessions. There's a sliding scale rate too that we just recently added for those because it is all about the impact. And right now we know that it's such a tough, difficult time for so many in the world. So just thank you so much for being here and for sharing who you are. If anyone has questions for Teresa or would like to know more about her journey or even the electrophysiology, we didn't even talk about that. There's so much that we didn't even touch on.
I know.
You can email Teresa at demille.teresa@gmail.com. So we have it. We'll put it in the comments below, or not the comments, but the description, so you can do that. But Teresa, thank you so much for being here. I know you had a very long day at work, and so thank you. We appreciate you and we love you, and I just can't wait to see what happens from here on out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Amazing day.
And live your life today.